Detective Explainer here. Today, I'm going to explain a drama thriller film called Fear. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. In Seattle, 16-year-old Nicole Walker lives with her dad, Stephen, stepmom, Laura, and stepbrother, Toby. Like a typical teenager, Nicole occasionally butts heads with her father, especially when Stephen voices his opinion on how she dresses. At work, Stephen talks to his colleague about a problem that needs taking care of. From school, Nicole goes with her friends, Margot and Gary, to a bar and eat. As Margot's attention shifts to the guy playing billiards, Nicole sees the handsome and charismatic David playing with him. After getting their order, Nicole takes one last look at David before leaving with her friends. As Nicole and Margot relax by the pool at Margot's house, they talk about dating, and Margot invites her to a party. Sadly, Nicole turns down her invitation since she has to attend a James Taylor concert with her family. Margot's mom then informs the girls that Stephen has just arrived to pick up Nicole, and the girls say goodbye to each other. When Nicole and Stephen get home, Nicole helps Laura prepare their food. While Stephen talks to his office mate on the phone, asking if they could have their meeting through a conference call. After talking to his coworker, Stephen tells his family that he can't come to the concert because he needs to go to Vancouver. This turns into an argument as a disappointed Laura tells Stephen off, saying that he should keep his word to his family since going to the concert was his idea. Upset, Nicole walks out and goes to her room, while Stephen lets out his anger by hitting the cupboard. Nicole immediately calls Margot to inform her that she's coming with her to the party. That night, Nicole and Margot attend the party, where they see the guy that Margot likes from the bar. Margot wants them to say hi to him, but Nicole refuses and just watches her friend approach him. While Nicole stands there, David walks up to her and engages her in small talk. Suddenly, a fight ensues at the party, and everyone starts running in different directions. David makes sure to protect Nicole while he's getting her out of there. As they move, he calls his friend, Logan, to follow them. David brings Nicole to the rooftop, where they take the fire exit ladder to escape. David goes down first, and when Nicole descends the ladder, the door to the rooftop bursts open and in come the people from the party, including Margot and Logan, who are now holding hands. Nicole calls her friend, but Margot only waves at her and says she'll see her later. Nicole then continues her way down the ladder, where David waits for her at the landing. David takes Nicole to a quiet spot overlooking the city, and Nicole starts talking about her mom. She used to stay with her mom at a big house in LA when she was just 9 years old, while her dad moved up to Seattle. Nicole says her mom was sad most of the time, and she felt like she's the one taking care of her instead of the other way around. David sympathizes with her, and when he asks if she gets along well with her dad, Nicole replies that she isn't sure since she only moved up there about a year ago. When it's Nicole's turn to ask David anything about himself, David starts telling her about his parents, saying he doesn't live with them, but they talk all the time. As David talks about his folks, Nicole stares at him, and David asks her what she's thinking. Nicole admits that David isn't what she expected him to be when she first saw him, even calling him sweet. David then tells her that she's beautiful and asks if she has any flaws, so he can believe that she's real. Flattered, Nicole quips that her curfew's at midnight, and she needs to get home. But instead of taking her home, David reaches for her hand and adjusts the time in her watch, setting it back more than a couple of minutes. With that, David kisses Nicole passionately, and when she kisses him back, David starts touching her. Nicole gently pushes him back, apologizing and saying he's found her flaw, but David disagrees with her. He says that it's not a flaw but another thing for him to admire and respect. At home, Laura gets mad at Nicole for violating her curfew, but Nicole explains that her watch broke. Instead of arguing with her, Laura tells Nicole to go to bed and remove her makeup, commenting that she looks like a harlot. Once Stephen is back from his trip, he talks to Nicole and asks why she went home past her curfew. He asks her who's the guy she was with, and she says he's just a guy she met. When Stephen starts insisting that he should meet David, Nicole replies that she isn't even sure if she'll see him again. For her punishment, Stephen gives her kitchen duty and yard work for 2 weeks, and Nicole accepts it. As she leaves, Stephen also reminds her to apologize to Laura, but Nicole only gets irritated and retorts that she'll only say sorry to her if Laura apologizes for calling her a harlot. Laura tells Stephen that he's too easy on Nicole and he should ground her. She thinks that he's giving Nicole everything she wants, like he's forever trying to make it up to her. However, Stephen is unhappy with Laura's choice of words when she talked to Nicole, and Laura admits that she made a mistake. At school, David picks up Nicole and takes her to play billiards. It's clear that Nicole is deeply smitten with David, so when he tells her that he wants to meet her family, Nicole quickly agrees. She introduces David to her father, who asks if he's not in school with Nicole. David says he might try UW in the fall, adding that he's still exploring his options. As they talk, Laura arrives and asks Nicole for help in the garden, but Nicole says she needs to get changed. David politely steps in and offers to help Laura. Toby, who has immediately taken a liking to David, asks if he could join them. With all eyes on her, Laura accepts David's offer. With David even teaching Laura some gardening techniques, Nicole and Margot couldn't help but feel impressed. After working in the garden, David asks Laura where he can wash up, and Stephen points him to the bathroom. As David cleans himself, Margot asks Stephen to come with them to the amusement park, but he only chuckles in response. David then calls out to Nicole and casually orders her to get him a Coke, getting Stephen's attention. As Margot convinces Stephen to join them, she intentionally bends down to fix her shoes, almost exposing her backside to Nicole's father. Stephen catches David watching him as he stares at Margot, making him feel guilty and uncomfortable. Nicole then gives David the Coke, and he tells her that they still need to pick up Logan. Nicole leaves to get her stuff with Margot following her, and as soon as Stephen and David have the room to themselves, Stephen reminds him that Nicole's curfew is at midnight. David says he understands, but as soon as Stephen turns his back on him, David adjusts the time in his clock backward before leaving. From the monitor, Stephen sees David helping Nicole into his car by putting his hands on her bottom, making Stephen uneasy. While at the amusement park, Nicole and David can't keep their hands off each other. They continue to have a good time, and as Nicole looks at Margot and Logan, she feels uncomfortable seeing them kiss. Back at home, Stephen misses his deadline for work, not knowing that David has adjusted his clock. He then tells Laura that he needs to go back to Vancouver, and he even invites her to join him, which she accepts. While Stephen and Laura prepare to leave for Vancouver, Laura makes sure that Nicole and Toby have the hotel number and reminds them to take care of each other. Before leaving, Stephen also reminds Nicole not to let anyone in their house. Later that day, Nicole calls David and informs him that her parents are out of town, but David tells her that he's promised his friends he'd help them out with something. Hearing the disappointment in Nicole's voice, David asks her if he could come to her house afterwards, and Nicole says yes. She then gives him their home security code, adding that she'll wait for him. As David goes into the Walker's house that night, he quietly wanders around the house and takes a look at Nicole's family photograph. He goes to Nicole's bedroom, where he finds her sleeping, then opens her jewelry box to examine its contents. He looks at Nicole, then gently removes her blanket, revealing that she's only wearing her undergarments. When Nicole opens her eyes, she sees David naked, standing over her. With David sitting beside Nicole, he removes what little clothing she has on and starts kissing her. Unable to stop herself, Nicole returns his kiss, and as they make love for the first time, David tells Nicole that he loves her. The following day, David arrives at Nicole's school to pick her up. And he sees Nicole and Gary hugging as they say goodbye to each other. David gets jealous, and without thinking, he attacks Gary, repeatedly hitting him even though he's already down. Nicole tries to stop him, but she ends up getting hurt in the process. Realizing that Nicole is screaming and crying, David asks her to come with him, but Nicole snaps at him to leave her alone. At home, when Nicole finishes taking a shower, she realizes that David accidentally gave her a black eye. Laura suddenly knocks on the door and asks if she can come in, and when she does, she asks Nicole what happened to her face. Nicole lies about getting hurt during their volleyball practice, and believing her, Laura covers her bruise with makeup. Downstairs, Nicole tries not to look directly at her dad, afraid of what he might say. Once Nicole is gone, Stephen asks Laura what's that about, and Laura tells him what Nicole told her, adding that she gave Nicole a little makeup lesson. As Nicole and Gary walk in the school corridor, they talk about how David attacked Gary. Unbeknownst to the two, David is behind them, listening. After Nicole's class, she goes to her locker and finds a note from David, asking for forgiveness and begging her to meet him at the bar where they first saw each other. David waits at the bar for Nicole, and when she doesn't show up, he gets very frustrated. At home, Nicole receives flowers from David, which she immediately throws away. Laura just looks at Nicole, waiting for her stepdaughter to tell her what happened, but Nicole just keeps quiet. That night, Laura and Steve hear Nicole sobbing, and when Laura decides to check on her, she asks Nicole if the flowers were from him. Nicole says yes, then recounts to Laura how David suddenly changed and beat up Gary. Hearing his daughter's story from the doorway, Stephen gets in Nicole's room and asks her if David was responsible for her black eye. Crying, Nicole says she's already told them how she got her black eye, and while she sobs into Laura's arms, Laura tells her husband to let her handle Nicole. As Stephen is about to leave, Laura asks him to toss her the Kleenex. Stephen accidentally drops it, and when he bends down to pick it up, he finds a contraceptive wrapper on the floor. Instead of confronting Nicole about it, he tells her that no matter what he's done in the past that she didn't like, it isn't a good enough reason for her to mess up her whole life. Confused, Nicole replies that she doesn't know what he's talking about, and Stephen says that's what worries him. Nicole then asserts that not every move she makes has to do with him. However, Steven disagrees with Nicole and tells her that as long as she lives under his roof, she will follow all his rules. Steven then states there's something wrong with David, adding that he's not a good guy. Upset, Nicole tells her dad that no matter what happens, it will be between them. After talking to Nicole, Laura asks her husband what he meant back in Nicole's room. Steven then shows her the contraceptive wrapper, then claims that he knows David hit Nicole. Outside, Nicole gets the envelope that she threw away with the flowers and finds her picture with David inside. The next day, Nicole tells Margot about what happened, saying David didn't mean to hit her. As they talk, Logan and his friends suddenly show up, and before David could talk to her, Nicole leaves. David catches up to Nicole as she drives away, asking if she could give him a minute. David explains himself, claiming that he didn't know that it was Gary who was hugging her and that all he saw was some guy with his hands all over her. He says he'd do anything to protect her, and that he would kill anyone who tries to hurt her. David apologizes for what happened to Gary, then promises her that it will never happen again. Nicole believes him. When Steven gets home from work, he is surprised to see David in his house. David is by the pool with Nicole, Laura, and Toby, and they're playing around while having a good laugh. Steven even sees David pushing Nicole and Laura into the pool, which confuses him. When Laura gets out of the pool, Steven asks her why David is there, and she asks him if he'd rather Nicole lied and snuck off to see David. Speechless, Steven can only watch as David kisses Nicole in front of him. Later on, Steven does some digging on David and finds out that he's lied to Nicole about his parents. Steven calls Laura to tell her about his discovery. It turns out that growing up, David was actually transferred from one foster home to another, then into an institution until he was kicked out upon turning 18. Unimpressed by Steven's findings, Laura tells him that David probably lied to Nicole just to impress her since he must be embarrassed about being an orphan. However, Steven is having none of it and retorts that David is giving him the creeps. Still determined to keep David away from his daughter, Steven goes to Nicole's school, knowing that David will show up to pick her up. Once David arrives, Steven tells him that they need to talk and asks David to follow him around the corner. David follows him, and Steven directly orders him to stop seeing Nicole. Pissed, David tries to turn the tables on Steven by piling on his shortcomings. David says he knows Steven left Nicole when she needed him the most and that things are falling apart for him at work. As he continues using profanities, David even insults Steven's virility, announcing that he isn't keeping up his end of the bargain with his wife. Aghast, Steven threatens to hurt David if he doesn't disappear from his family's life while poking David's chest with his fingers. Steven furiously drives away, and as he does, David repeatedly hits the exact spot that Steven touched on his chest. Still furious, Steven consults his lawyer friend, Alex, regarding what they can do to keep David away from Nicole. Alex tells him that even though David has a record, everything could still backfire. Resolved to get rid of David, Steven tells Alex that he's not just going to sit around and do nothing about it, so Alex says he'll make a few calls and see what he can do. At home, Nicole confronts Steven about hitting David, saying she just saw all his bruises. This shocks Steven, and he denies hitting him hard. But Nicole won't even let him finish explaining. She calls her father a hypocrite, and as she leaves, she tells him that he just lost her respect. Nicole then gets out of the house, and as Steven follows her, she gets into David's car before they speed away, making him even madder. David and Nicole make out in the car, and for the first time, Nicole tells David that she loves him. After that, David takes Nicole back to their house and asks her if she's sure she doesn't want to come home with him. When Nicole says she can't, David leaves, but Nicole changes her mind and drives to David's house herself. Realizing that there's a party, Nicole walks toward the house, and as she gets closer, she sees Margot and Logan in the window using coke. David then shows up and forces Margot to tell Logan that she wants him. And when she does, David carries her over his shoulder before giving her behind a little smack. Afraid of what she just witnessed, Nicole quickly drives back home. The following day, Nicole leaves an apology note to her dad. And when David shows up at her school, Nicole causes a scene and tells him to stay away from her. Gary comes to Nicole's aid, asking David to let her go. Later that day, Margot visits Nicole and Nicole confronts her about what she saw at the party. Margot says David forced her to do it, but Nicole doesn't believe her. She breaks off her friendship with Margot before slamming the door on her face. Margot begs Nicole not to leave her, saying that she's her only friend, but Nicole only ignores her. Margot drives away and David follows her, demanding the heartbroken girl to pull over. Margot, however, ignores him and continues driving, but when she almost crashed into another car, she finally pulls over. David then hits her and asks what she told Nicole, but Margot insists that she didn't tell her anything. David physically assaults Margot and demands her to fix their problem with Nicole. even threatening to hurt her if she doesn't. David then goes to Nicole's house and apologizes to Steven, but he isn't interested in his apology and closes the door on him. When David gets home, he carves Nicole's name on his chest, showing his obsession with her. The next day, Steven finally fixes his problem at work. Meanwhile, after seeing Nicole with Gary, David follows Gary as he goes home, then kills him in the woods. Back at Steven's office, Steven finds his car in the parking lot, completely wrecked, with an insulting note from David. He proceeds to borrow his coworker's car and tries calling Laura and Nicole. But when they don't answer, he calls Margot to ask where David lives. At the mall, David corners Nicole inside the bathroom. He covers her mouth and pins her against the wall, insisting that her father is just jealous of them, and that's why he's breaking them apart. David adds that everybody wants what they have, but they can't let others take it. When another woman comes into the bathroom, David kisses Nicole goodbye before leaving. Finally reaching David's place, Steven breaks into his house and finds their family photo in one of the boxes. David has replaced Steven in the picture with his own photo, and Steven also finds Nicole's undergarment and bracelet. And David's replaced the letters with his name, too. Enraged, Steven vandalizes the house. David and his friends then arrive, only to find their home destroyed. When David realizes it's Steven's doing, they decide to go see him. In retaliation, David and his gang head to the Walkers' residence, intending to break into their house. Meanwhile, Margot gets there first and informs everyone that Gary is dead and that his body is found beaten to death in the woods. Outside, David and his friends behead Kaiser, the Walkers' family dog, and when Toby calls out for him, they insert the dog's severed head inside the dog door. David and Laura try calling for help through the phone in their security system, but nothing's working. Despite the chaos, Laura assures them that it's going to be okay. No one can get inside if they don't have the security code, after all. However, Nicole informs her dad that David has it. Steven rushes to the door and closes it just as David is about to get inside, and through the peephole, David taunts Steven before demanding that he let him in. Thirsty for revenge, David and his friends make several attempts to get inside. Meanwhile, Steven instructs Nicole to take Margot and Toby to her room and stay with them. And Laura to get the flashlight and turn off every light in the house. With a drill, one of the guys manages to break the door's glass, and when he is about to open it, Steven hits his hands with a fireplace poker. Logan attempts to break the other door open, but Laura and Steven barricade it with the refrigerator. Upstairs, Nicole uses an umbrella to push out the guy who's trying to get into her room through her window. After seeing the light from the security guard's office, Nicole starts using a flashlight to send an SOS to him. Meanwhile, Laura picks up the hand drill that David's friend dropped and uses it on his other guy's hand to thwart his attempts at getting inside. David and his friends see the guard's car coming, and with David's help, Logan tries to incapacitate him. They fail, however, and when Steven shows up, he tells the guard, Larry, that he's okay before punching Logan and David. Unfortunately, David's friend, Terry, shoots and kills Larry. Steven tries to get back inside the house, but Logan stops and hits him. Using Steven as their hostage, David and his gang finally manage to get Laura to open the door. Inside, they cuff Steven and Laura while Toby gets out of the window and walks on the roof. He then gets into his mother's car and uses the car phone to call for help. In Nicole's bedroom, Logan breaks the door open and attempts to force himself on Nicole. Margot helps her friend by jumping on Logan's back, but Logan overpowers her and repeatedly hits her. In the garage, Toby manages to start the engine of Laura's car and run Terry over before calling 911 again. Toby goes back inside the house, where he sees his mother gagged and bound. He heads back outside to retrieve the keys for the handcuffs, while upstairs, David shoots Logan in the head for attempting to force himself on Nicole. He then tells Nicole to say goodbye to her father, and as he is about to shoot Steven, Nicole begs him not to. While David gets distracted talking to Nicole, Laura wakes Margot and frees Steven, giving him the opportunity to hit David. Unfortunately, David is too fast for him, and he manages to knock him down. As he is about to shoot Steven again, Nicole stabs David in the back with a peace pipe. David then tries to approach Nicole, but Steven stops him, plunging them into a physical fight. Despite his injuries, David remains strong and manages to overpower Steven. Still, with every bit of his strength, Steven finally manages to throw David out the window to his death. With David finally out of their lives, Nicole and the rest hug each other as the cops and paramedics arrive. Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.